Testing this microphone. Testing. Welcome to episode 12 of Phantom X Archive. I am your host, Alien Super Soldier, and it's good to be back. As you know, I took a little break from podcasting a whole month because I was doing grad school. Well, that's over, and we're back in business. I before we start, I need to make a few corrections. I was listening to the earliest episodes of the podcast, and there are a few mistakes that I made. Number one of the articles I listed as one of my sources that I said was written by Nicole Neese. Uh, that's wrong, and it was in fact written by Dr. Bethan Jones, whom I had met at FileFest and whose book I have read and enjoyed. The reason I made that mistake was because I think it's because I had read another article that was written by Nicole Neese, and I think that's why I got mixed up. So I am sorry, Dr. Jones. Uh, we got that corrected. And the second one is I said very early on that this podcast is available on basically every platform, and that is not true. Uh, as you know, Pandora will not let me stream the podcast on their platform because I live in Sweden, and iTunes. I tried and tried uh, to post my to have my podcast featured on iTunes, and there seems to be some problem, just some technical issues, and I wanted to try and fix them, but I decided uh, later on that I don't want to. I don't want this podcast to be on iTunes for several reasons. One of them is political, and the other reason is I just don't want to. I am not a fan of iTunes. I'm not a fan of that whole structure. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. And but but we are on YouTube. We're on YouTube. I originally did not want this podcast to be on YouTube because I am afraid of YouTube. I have seen how toxic and hateful YouTube comment sections can be, and I just did not want to have anything to do with that. But later on, I realized that some some of you who are listening may need to read closed captions, and for that reason, I decided to put all my episodes on YouTube so that you can listen to the episodes and read closed captions and have a good experience, basically. So this is the news. I will post the link to my YouTube channel. I guess I'm a YouTuber now. Uh, the link to my YouTube channel in the description of this episode, so that you can go ahead and listen to all the episodes that I have produced so far on YouTube, and also, do that YouTube thing, subscribe to the channel, like, and do all those, YouTube things. So, this month's episode is very, very special. It's the first the 1 year anniversary of this podcast, and we already celebrated the anniversary by playing the X Files game, which we did last week, but that was not an episode of the podcast. I don't know how you would go about and make an episode out of a very, very chaotic gameplay. But this episode is the official sort of, you know, 1 year anniversary celebration. And I am going to do a live fanfic read. Now, another correction. I said in the past that I started this podcast in May 2023, and that is not true. I got mixed up again. I started this podcast in June 2023, more precisely June 24, which makes it exactly 1 year. Well, 1 year and 2 days to be exact. So, yeah, a year. It's been a year. And I don't really know what to think or feel right now. It feels like not a job. It does feel like I still have to do a job to prepare for each episode. You know, I write, I do research, I reach out to people, and recording, editing, producing, all that stuff, all the technical stuff, which I hate. But at the same time, I am having so much fun doing this. And I realized pretty recently that I just want to keep doing this. I want to keep doing this podcast no matter where I am in life, no matter what I do, what my, day job is. I hope that I will get to do this for as long as I can, and I hope that I will not get tired of or turned off by of doing this podcast, because I am having a blast. I'm having the best time doing this. Even just sitting home alone and recording or stressing over a script, I feel very privileged to be able to do this. I really am. And now I guess time for the fanfic read. Now, originally I wanted to do something different for this episode. I wanted to do a deep dive into the very sensitive topic of fan culture and toxicity in the fan culture, and just do an analysis and try and compare how things were before social media and how they are now. But I realized halfway through, well, June, that I wouldn't have enough time to prepare and really do the research and do this topic justice. So I am going to postpone that particular topic, that particular episode for a later time. And instead, tonight, we're just going to have some fun. So, the Gossamer Project is, or I guess was, an X-Files fanfiction archive. It was legendary. It was one of the biggest. And I'm going to post links to the site, the archive site, that you can still access, by the way. And I'm going to post a link to the fan lore page, which goes very deep into the history of Gossamer. So we're not going to talk about it in this episode, but we are going to read one of the fanfic, one of the stories posted on Gossamer. And as you know, I like my humorous X-Files. I like my humorous fanfic. So this is what we're going to read tonight. And this one is called Alter Ego. It was written by Stacy Oziel. I'm not sure if this is your real name, and if it is, and if I said it incorrectly, I am sorry. And let's see, summary. It was, oh, by the way, it was published on April 13, 1998. So that was way before I joined the X Files fandom, and way before I wrote my own first X Files fanfic. So, alter ego. Summary. A freak accident sends Mulder and Scully into a strange realm where their lives have been made into a TV show, and they're played by two actors named David and Jillian. Author's note. This story is my attempt at tribute to the great Vince Gilligan, and like this story's inspiration, Bad Blood, this isn't an X File with humorous undertones, but rather a comedic X File. You've been warned. Thanks again to my fabulous editors, Meg and Shannon. You guys are the greatest. Disclaimer: Mulder and Scully belong only to each other. Oh, and Chris Carter, too. I wish they belonged to me. I guess the only one who actually does is the poor gas station attendant, Edgar Jenkins. Okay, listen up. Nobody used Edgar without my express permission, damn it. Enough said. And now, on with the show. Northampton, Vancouver, 11:45 a.m. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Bang, bang. Mulder sighed and kicked the door once for good measure. Scully, I don't think anyone's home. Mulder, let's just go. We can try back later. Why don't we go talk to that woman who... He shook his head. I'm going in, Scully. She looked at him, cocking an eyebrow in that way of hers that signified amusement, masquerading as annoyance. Mulder didn't buy it for a second. He turned away and whipped out a patented, super-duper FBI standard issue lockpicker. Before his doubtful partner could object, he rammed the power tool in, flicked the switch, and tried his damnedest not to grin in victory when a door popped open. Hello? Anybody home? Mulder's low voice rumbled ominously through the Tudor-style house. Come on, Jew-woman. Scully rolled her eyes, but followed him anyway. They were investigating a case that had landed on Mulder's desk this morning regarding a team of physicists who had disappeared under strange circumstances. Their last known meeting together had reportedly been in this very old, dank and musty Tudor house. He wrinkled his nose. Something about this place felt wrong. Mulder thought about mentioning this to Scully, but decided against it. He knew how she loved those unsubstantiated, proofless hunches. Even though his hunches had beaten her theories on more occasions than she'd ever admit. Hey, Scully, he called. What's the address to this place? 1313 Mockingbird Lane? He wondered if she'd get the reference, but then again, she didn't watch as much TV as he did. They both skidded to a stop when they came upon a large dining room. In the center stood a long wooden table, and it looked like there had been a meeting here that had been hastily abandoned. The table was littered with printouts, used coffee cups, and other miscellaneous equipment. Scully stepped forward to examine one printout that stood out from the rest. On it was circled a cryptic message. Testing not advised until dimensional soundness ensured. Mulder read the sentence over her shoulder, and they looked at one another. So, Dr. Scully, what do you make of all this? The corner of her mouth quirked up. I haven't seen anything to make of yet. Besides, Mulder, what makes you think I'm qualified to tell you what these physicists were working on? The police couldn't get anything from the Foundation about what the research involved. Guess Einstein's twin paradox and new interpretation was just a fluke. Apparently physics isn't your forte. He gave her a sly glance. At least I didn't spend my college years studying the ways to make everything in existence into a sexual symbol, she shot back. But then again, that does seem right up your alley. Touché, Mulder winced. Wasn't the Scully the witty one today? Mulder turned to walk into another room when his knee bumped into a large metal object. He flinched and cursed under his breath. Scully came over. What is that? I'm hoping you'll know, because I sure don't. They knelt in unison and examined the object in great detail. It was very oddly shaped and had an intricate configuration of wires and other little doohickeys Mulder couldn't begin to identify. Scully had never seen this degree of sophistication before in such a small device. They'd have to be careful not to touch anything. God knew what this thing would do. Suddenly, Mulder saw a large round dial with red digits. What would happen if Scully saw the movement and yelled at him to stop? Mulder, no, no! Dramatic pause. No! Scully stopped short, and both gaped in utter astonishment. They were no longer in the old Tudor house. No, both stood in the center of what looked like Mulder's apartment. What the hell? They could do little more than stand there, as their minds tried to make sense of what had just happened. Mulder looked around, dazed. Scully, he said, his voice trembling just a bit, I have just two questions for you. One, why are we in my apartment? And two, how in the hell did we get here? Scully, shaken, just shook her head numbly. They both collapsed heavily on Mulder's futon when their wobbly knees wouldn't support them. Even in his overwhelming confusion, Mulder sensed something very, very wrong with their surroundings. What should have felt comfortably familiar to him felt distinctly foreign. If he didn't know better, he'd say that everything looked superficial, fake even, as if no one really lived here. They both jumped as a bell pierced shrilly through the air. Cut! Cut! David, Jillian, those weren't your lines. Alicia, give them their cues again. They bolted to their feet. They bolted to their feet in terror, Mulder grabbing Scully's arm as she wobbled unsteadily. They spun around. They simply couldn't believe their eyes. Apparently, they hadn't looked in back of them when they arrived. Mulder's apartment was a bit drafty. Specifically, it was missing one wall. In place of this wall was a small, cramped area filled with people and what looked like camera equipment. A short man wearing a beret came up to them, looking very impatient. All the agents could do was stare blankly at him. Mulder grasped Scully's shoulders in order to keep them both from toppling over. Guys, what's going on? We have a schedule to keep. Let's go. What's the problem? The problem is, Mulder said, finally mustering the courage to speak, that we have no idea what you're talking about. Who are you and why did you bring us here? Who the hell gave you the right to make the replica of my apartment? Listen, we're agents with the FBI, and it's a federal offense to abduct an agent of the U.S. government. He reached into his pocket to grab his FBI credentials and flashed them defiantly. Scully peered at them and cleared her throat, looking embarrassed. Mulder, she said, her voice low, it's a fake. Mulder looked at it and saw that it was true. It wasn't even his own signature on a card, and he couldn't remember looking so morose in this picture. He dropped the damn thing in his exasperation. The man looked at him strangely, a bemused smile playing on his lips. What is this about, Duchovny? I do believe your sense of humor has gotten weirder and weirder since you did the Larry Sanders and got nominated for that Emmy. Now you think you're some sort of comedian. Mulder stared blankly at him. Who the hell is Duchovny? And what's Larry Sanders? Scully was getting angry. Apparently someone was playing a patently unfunny practical joke on both of them, and she didn't like it one bit. Listen, I don't know who you are, but you will take us back to where you got us from right now so we can stop this whole charade. Scully folded her arms. The man's eyes rolled heavenward in patient exasperation. Actors. Jillian, we're on a tight schedule. We don't have time for an ego trip or for you to go back to your trailer in the middle of blocking a scene. He sighed and shrugged in seeming acquiescence. Okay, both of you, 15 minutes. Suddenly, a girl ran up to the man. Mr. Manners, she whispered, Chris is on the phone from LA and wants to talk to you. Something about a wedding ring for the flashback episode? Manners glanced at them and rolled his eyes. Jesus, the internet fans are going to have a fit. Oh well, okay, guys, be back in 15 minutes. Everyone seemed to scatter at once, and they were left alone on the faux apartment soundstage. They just stood there in confusion for a few moments, not trusting their respective eyes. Suddenly, Scully gasped, Oh my god, Mulder, it's my apartment! Or part of it. Scully ran up to the darkened shell of her apartment and looked around in astonishment. It almost looks exactly the same, except for the fact that I have a bathroom and my kitchen's not open air. Scully, Mulder said into her ear, this is a soundstage. This is where a TV show is being filmed. Yeah, Mulder, I kind of figured that out. Mulder spun around slowly, taking in the scenery. Mulder, Scully said in muted wonder, do you realize what this means? Not a clue. Enlighten me, short stuff. She shot him a look of annoyed impatience. Don't you see it? It all adds up. A set that looks like your apartment, fake FBI credentials, people talking about your Emmy nomination. She found her voice getting shriller as the absurdity of the situation dawned on her. You're right, Scully. It's a TV show about me. Mulder sat in awe. Scully rolled her eyes. Out of nowhere, a dog ran up to Mulder and started jumping up on him as if he were Mulder's best friend. Mulder just stared at the scruffy animal, not knowing what to do. He hated dogs with a passion. A woman ran after the dog, carrying a leash. Come here, Blue. Sorry, Dave, I couldn't keep her in the trailer when I knew you were on break. You know she can't stand to be away from you. Mulder looked down at the shaggy dog who was attempting to lick his face. Toto, he said, addressing the slurping beast. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Scully shook her head, slowly, unable to speak. A few minutes later, both were deposited in a large aluminum Airstream trailer, with a strange glance from the woman when they both entered together. On the way, they'd seen Skinner walking past. Both did a double take. Sir? Mulder had said to him excitedly, What's going on here? The man had only looked at them with puzzlement. What do you mean? We don't have our scene until 2:30. Oh, and David, Nick Lee and I are going golfing on Sunday at 1 p.m. Would you like to join us? Mulder had agreed just for the hell of it, although he wondered silently to himself just who Nick Lee was and why they played golf, of all things. Ugh. And then, when he and Scully had approached the trailer, they'd gotten another shock. The name on the door said David Duchovny. Neither had ever heard that name before. They shut the door and stared at each other. Okay, Scully, I'm stumped. You're the physics expert. Tell me how it is that we okay, sorry, I'm gonna have to edit this part out. Okay, Scully, I'm stumped. You're the physics expert. Tell me how it is that we were somehow transported from that house to this television studio, which just happens to look exactly like my apartment. Scully could do little more than shake her head. I don't know, Mulder. I am so confused right now that I can barely think. They sat there in silence for a few minutes, trying to make sense of their surroundings. Suddenly, Mulder jerked as if he'd been stung. He dashed to a nearby side table and picked up a small framed photograph from it. It was a picture of him he'd never taken, along with an adorably perky blonde woman he'd never met. They had their arms around each other and looked positively in love. The frame was engraved. Mulder looked closer. It read, David and Taya forever. His hands shaking, Mulder gave the picture to Scully, and her eyes widened. Mulder, who is this woman? He shook his head, stunned. Scully, I have no idea. I've never met her. But he couldn't help noticing she certainly was a dish. Scully bolted to her feet, shaking with fury. Mulder, what is this? Why is this happening? I don't get it. Why did that man call me Jillian and you David? I don't. Mulder grabbed her and looked into her eyes. Scully, you always have to remind me to think rationally. So let's do that, okay? She nodded slowly. Okay. Scully sat down on a trailer's bed. Scully, I've read X Files involving strange bubbles of alternate realities, a jump in dimensions, if you will. Even the ancient Paitas tell of an. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this. I'm gonna have to do another take and cut this part out because I can't pronounce the names. Even the ancient Paitas tell of the Atantawa and otherness, just like what we're experiencing. Is it possible that my touching the machine somehow brought us here? Could we somehow have broken through the linear time and space, entering a parallel dimension? Scully started to smile, then stopped abruptly when she realized Mulder wasn't joking. You've got to be kidding. No. Tell me that's impossible, Scully. It's impossible, Mulder. Okay, then what's your explanation? She bit her lip. We're both hallucinating. This is all in our heads. I don't know. I could still be a very, it could still be a very, very well detailed practical joke. But why? That's what she couldn't figure out. They jumped again, and someone knocked on the trailer's door. Come in, Mulder called out hesitantly. He felt odd doing that in someone else's trailer. The door opened, and in walked a tiny little red-haired child of about 3 or 4. To Scully's astonishment, the child launched herself into Scully's arms. Not knowing what to do, she held the child, jaw slack with surprise. A young woman poked her head in. Hey, Jillian, I thought you might want to see Piper since you have a break. She's been asking for you. The door shut, and the agent stared at the little red-haired tot, trying to decide what to say. Little girl, Mulder began, eyeing Scully. Where's your mommy right now? She looked at him, her eyes wide. My mommy's here, she giggled and buried her head in Scully's chest. He glanced at his partner, gauging her reaction. Scully stiffly patted the little girl, looking for all the world as if she thought she were holding an alien in her arms. Suddenly, his vision went to a wrinkled-looking U.S. magazine on a table. He picked it up, and it had a picture of a very out-of-character Dana Scully on the cover. This Scully had on her... Sorry, I have to take a water break. This is the magic of recording, by the way. This is how it all goes down. This Scully had on not her patented pantsuit, but rather a skin-tight white ribbed tank top which clung wetly to his partner's full chest. The subtitle read, Hot TV, and the caption read, Gillian Anderson. Mulder gulped, feeling himself respond to this more relaxed version of his normally conservatively dressing partner. Hoo boy, Scully. Wordlessly, he handed the magazine to Scully. She gaped at it and gently pushed the little girl away in order to look more closely at it. Oh my God, Mulder, Scully said as she flipped through the magazine's pages. It says here that Agents Mulder and Scully are played by Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny. Apparently, we are characters played by two actors on a television show called... Her eyes went over the article's text. The X-Files. They stared at each other. Mulder got up and began pacing restlessly. Scully, I don't get it. Why would anyone want to make a television program about our lives? I mean, both of us live for our work. We have no special hobbies, unless we count my penchant for collecting adult videos and peddling in paranoia. A quick glance at Scully told him that did not count in the slightest. And no sex lives to speak of either. Scully looked offended. Speak for yourself. I am, Mulder admitted somewhat sadly. Scully looked pained. And Mulder, that's not the worst of it. The show is apparently on the Fox network. The Fox network? The home of world's greatest police chases, Stu and Melrose Place? It's probably the lowest rated show on television. He sighed, putting his head in his hands. I was hoping at least for must see TV Wednesdays. Scully shrugged and shook her head sadly. I don't know, Scully. This could be some kind of trick, he continued. Maybe this is Cancerman's way of getting back at us for all the things we've done over the years. You know what, Mulder? It doesn't matter. For whatever reason, they want us to think that there's a show about the X Files and that we are played by two actors who somehow look exactly like us. Someone's going to go great lengths to convince us of this. So I say we play along with this practical joke, for now, until we find out what the trick is to getting out of this living hell. Mulder looked at her and shook his head. I'm beginning to feel that this is actually happening, Scully. Sweetheart, what's your last name? Mulder asked, turning to the little girl. Anderson Klotz, the little girl answered timidly. The agents looked at each other. Is Klotz your daddy? Scully asked. She nodded. All right, Mrs. Klotz, there's the phone. Go ahead. Call Skinner. Or better yet, call the FBI and ask for us by name. Do it. He dared her, wanting her to find out what he already knew. I will, Mulder. Scully picked up the phone and dialed the number for the DC FBI until she heard the canned voice of the operator telling her it was a long-distance number. Mulder, they took us farther than we thought. We're not in DC anymore. So dial the area code first, Mulder told her. Sighing in exasperation, she picked up the receiver and dialed again. Dana Scully or Fox Mulder, please? Scully asked, a confident half-smile on her face. Then suddenly her face fell. What do you mean, like I've never heard that one before? Hello? Hello? She slammed the phone down, averting her eyes. Mulder looked at her. I won't say I told you so. Scully glared at him. You just did, Mulder. She sighed and rubbed her eyes. This is some kind of conspiracy. I think that the only conspiracy here is you not believing that something has really happened to us and our world. We're not in our own space anymore, Scully. We'd better learn to accept that. Whatever. Just don't ask me to dress like this, Scully grumbled, glaring at the cover image of her doppelganger in a ridiculously wet tank top. As if anyone would ever wear that on a magazine cover. Another rap on their door, and they were told to report back to set. Scully, Mulder said slowly, we're actors. We're going to have to learn lines and recite them. I was Pinocchio in my sixth grade play, but that was the extent of my experience. Not to mention the unpleasant fact that I fell off the stage during the I Got No Strings number, which I don't mind telling you scarred me for life. I don't know if I can do this. Well, Scully mused, I've always wanted to try my hand at acting. Now I've got my chance. I just never expected that I'd be playing myself. At least I'm played by a good-looking man, Mulder joked, glancing at himself in the mirror. His suit, which was perfectly tailored, was a whole hell lot of a nicer. Okay, this is a strange sentence. His suit, which was perfectly tailored, was a whole hell of a lot nicer than the off-the-rack number he normally wore. But his tie was just as uninspired. He glanced at Scully, his eyes running over her. Nice suit, Scully. She looked down at herself, as if seeing her suit for the first time. Oh, this is nice. I think it's an Armani. I wonder if I can keep it. Scully was beginning to think she could get used to this sort of thing. I doubt it. Hey, you know we're going to have to start calling each other David and Jillian. And I get to be married. You're probably married to that Klotz guy too. Dana Klotz. He made a sound of amused disgust. No, Jillian Klotz, she reminded him. And at least I'm not married to someone named after an herbal beverage, Scully retorted. Mulder cracked a smile. I don't know about you, Scully, but I don't think it'll be too difficult to play ourselves. Especially not for me with my photographic memory. I'll learn my lines in no time. They walked back to the set. Water break. So, this is not the first story I've encountered that is about this premise. Characters get transported to a parallel dimension where it turns out that their lives are a TV show and they are mistaken for the actors that play them. But it might be one of the earliest because it was written in 98. So, yeah, it might be one of the earliest. The other one I remember vividly was written, well, a little later, but it was about Mulder and Krychek. It was about Mulder and Krychek, and they got transported to again, a parallel dimension, and there turns out that they're actors. And it was also pretty funny. And I know that there is a supernatural episode of the TV show Supernatural, which it has the exact same premise. And that show also was playing with fan theories and fan fiction. Uh, I They did it more than the X Files did, but call me biased. I think the X Files did it better. This whole interacting with fans and being meta. I think the X Files did it better. I think they were much more earnest and kinder in how they did it. But anyway, let's get back to reading. 7 hours later. Okay, guys, it's a wrap, Kim Manners told them. Jillian, great job today. You were so, I don't know, in character. Keep earning that Emmy. Scully gave a start and stared. A slow smile crept over her face. Hear that, David? Scully grinned. I won an Emmy. She was really starting to enjoy this. Well, I was nominated, he returned and spun around in annoyed defiance when a bunch of the crew members snickered. Mulder sighed. He'd made an utter fool of himself today, while Scully had positively shown. He felt like an imbecile, having blown his ridiculously technical sounding lines too many times to count. When he tried to convince Manners that Mulder just didn't talk like that, all he'd gotten was a strange look. In one scene, when he just couldn't get his tongue around a particular line, he thought he heard Manners mutter under his breath, "So much for one take Duchovny." Meanwhile, Scully seemed to take to acting like duck to water. Her skill had made him look like a complete idiot. Somehow her lines had sounded utterly natural coming out of her mouth, even though she'd taken issue with the accuracy of the scientific terminology a couple of times. "Oh, David, a word?" Manners gestured with his finger. Reluctantly, he came over. "Sorry, Kim, I think I'm having an off day. I'll do better tomorrow." He suddenly realized how ridiculous he felt saying this to him. He was an FBI agent, for Pete's sake. Acting was beneath him. Manners frowned. "You better, or Chris is gonna kill you." Mulder considered asking who Chris was, then thought the better of it. He didn't care. After they'd both changed clothing into whatever they'd found in their respective trailers, Scully and Mulder grabbed Piper and Blue from their handlers and began to drive, once they'd identified which car belonged to David. The problem was that they had no idea where they were or where they lived. They looked at a map they found in his glove compartment and nearly died of shock when they realized that they weren't even in their own country. "We're in Canada?" Mulder had exclaimed. "Why in the hell would they shoot a TV show about American FBI agents in Canada? For majestic scenery?" Scully didn't know. Then she'd come up with the idea of checking out their driver's licenses for the addresses, and once they did, they agreed that they would stick together and go to Mulder's, David's house, to talk about exactly what happened to them and what they intended to do about it. They'd stopped once to ask for directions and met with an unexpected delay. The gas station attendant that had come up to their window to give them directions had nearly passed out from excitement when he saw the car's passengers were none other than Mulder and Scully from that X-Files show, and as he so aptly put it. Hey man, I'm kind of embarrassed to be asking you this, but can I have your autograph? Scully smirked. Ah, the price of stardom. Mulder didn't see why not. Well, sure. Who do I make it out to? Edgar Jenkins, the man panted, nearly hyperventilating with excitement. After he'd scribbled his signature on a scrap of paper for the man who by now was beside himself with glee, Scully slapped her hand over her eyes and shook her head. Mulder, she said under her breath, you just signed your own signature. You're David Duchovny, remember? Mulder, relieved, realized the guy had noticed and watched him run to the other side of the car to get Scully's autograph as well. She looked at Mulder pointedly and wrote Gillian Anderson with great flourish. Sir, can I ask you a question? Mulder queried. Sure, Mr. Duchovny, anything, the man gushed. Is The X-Files a popular show? The man's eyes widened. Oh, yeah, everyone I know watches it, on account of, that whole sexual tension thing. They looked at each other. What sexual tension thing? Oh, we're just waiting for the day when Mulder and Scully finally get together. But everyone knows that's when the show would end. Scully raised her eyebrows, and Mulder cleared his throat. um, and if I wanted to find out what people thought of the show, where would I look? Mulder wanted to change the subject as quickly as possible. Well, offhand, I'd say look on the web. You can find just about anything on the web. Thanks, Mulder said, looking at Scully. I think we might just do that. Hey, the man said tentatively, can I ask you guys a personal question? The agents glanced at each other. Sure, Scully said. How bad could this be? Well, rumor has it you two guys can't stand each other and never see each other off the set. So what are you two doing in the same car together? Well, Mulder said after a strained pause, it's not true. Scully elbowed him sharply in the ribs. Jillian and I are best of friends. We love hanging out with one another. The man looked confused. But Mr. Duchovny, I thought you were married. Scully gave Mulder an amused, expectant glance. Mulder breathed. I am. Jillian, Tay, and I all hang out together. With that, they sped off, allowing the attendant to come to his own conclusions. End of part 1. So, how many references and in jokes about not just the show, but the fan culture, and especially fan culture in the 90s, have you spotted in this story so far? I wasn't counting, but it's I say gives this story another sort of dimension of enjoyment, because not only is this a story about Mulder and Scully being confused for Gillian and David, of them being transported into basically our world, but it also is such a great parody of the fan culture and the fan discourse, and what the culture was in the 90s, and of how popular the X-Files the show was in the 90s, that even this gas station attendant is the biggest fan. So it's just, I really love this story because it has so many references and it's such a great parody, such a great time capsule of that particular era. Okay, I'm gonna take another sip of my water. Okay, part 2. An hour and a half later, Mulder and Scully finally turned into the driveway of an unobtrusive wooden beach house. They parked and walked hesitantly up the steps. Mulder took out the set of keys he'd found in David's trailer and tried nearly every key until he found the right one. Blue wriggled impatiently, apparently waiting to be let in the house. The door opened and Blue dashed in. Hi, sweetie, came a high-pitched... Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Hi, sweetie, came a high pitched feminine voice, and they froze. What are you doing here? Mulder asked, startled. He realized how dumb that had sounded after he'd said it. After all, they were married, weren't they? Honey, I flew up from LA. Didn't you get my message? No. Guess I must have forgotten to check the machine. The woman poked her head out and looked surprised. Hi, Jillian. What are you doing here? They looked at each other. Um, were you here to go over the lines for tomorrow? Scully lied to the slender woman. Apparently, she dyed her hair black since the photo in the trailer had been taken, or maybe it had been the blonde that was from the bottle. Taya looked at her strangely. It's Friday. You don't report back to the set until Monday. This time, Mulder spoke up. Duty calls, sweetie. I'm sorry. Scully stared at her partner, bemused. Nice cover, Mulder. And then, out of nowhere, the woman threw herself into Mulder's arms, and she locked lips with Mulder in a passionate embrace. Scully thought she heard the click of her lower jaw falling to the floor. After a few moments of starting, After a few moments of staring at her partner in the arms of the stranger, it was beginning to register with her that Mulder was actually enjoying himself. Scully began to feel the uneasy stirrings of jealousy, and she folded her arms across her chest. Ahem. No response. Ahem. They unlocked lips and stared at her. I was just wondering if I could bring Piper in. Mulder looked sheepish. God, good, Scully. Sorry about that again. Mulder looked sheepish. Good, Scully thought sourly. This wasn't The Young and the Restless. Although it could be if they switched this X-Files show to daytime. Of course, Jillian, Taya gushed. You can put her in any of the spare rooms. Any of the spare rooms? Geez, this place is a palace, Mulder thought to himself. He wished the FBI paid him as well as acting apparently rewarded his pal Duchovny. Scully disappeared and then reappeared with little Piper. What an unusual name, Scully thought somewhat sadly to herself. Why do all celebrities have to name their kids something bizarre like Dweezil, Rumor, Tallulah Bell, and Scout? Although she kind of liked it, even if she couldn't figure out why. She had to admit there was something about it. After finding a card in Jillian's wallet with her phone number on it, she dialed the number, hoping to inform her husband, of whom she admitted to herself she didn't know the first name, of why she wouldn't be home that night. But when she got the machine, the message, in her own voice, to Scully's initial shock, said merely, Hi, you've reached Jillian and Piper Maru. Please leave a message at the sound of the tone. Beep. Suddenly, Scully realized where the name came from. She was astonished. Apparently, the show had done an episode about her and Mulder's run-in with the Piper Maru, a French cargo ship. Why in God's name would an actress name her baby after a ship? Meanwhile, Mulder explored the house and came upon a large room with his and hers computers. He decided that this would be Scully's and his operations center for the evening as they searched their alter egos. Okay, Taya, Mulder said to the pretty brunette. Jillian and I will be in here practicing our lines. Did you want the tape you asked me to call Fox for? What tape? You know, the Vince Gilligan episode. Didn't you want to watch it with Jillian? Oh, yeah, sure. It hadn't occurred to him actually to watch a previous episode of the show, but that was a perfect way to find out more about what was happening to them. Okay, Taya said with an adorably perky smile. Here it is. Bad blood. Night, sweetie. Scully walked in after having put Piper to bed, just in time to see Taya curl herself around her partner and begin to kiss him passionately. Mulder had to fight to keep himself from getting aroused in the arms of his beautiful wife of his. He found himself becoming just a little envious of this David Duchovny, wherever he was. Scully just stood there, tapping her foot in barely veiled annoyance. Oh, David, Scully said, her voice annoyingly sing-songy. Let's get to work. Night, Jillian, Taya said sweetly, and disengaged herself from flushed but happy Mulder. Night, Taya, Scully said in a too perky tone of voice, causing Mulder to shoot her a warning glance. Mulder waited until Taya left the room and then let Scully have it. Scully, why are you being so catty to her? Don't forget, we're married. She has the right to kiss me if she wants to. And I didn't know you were the jealous type, I added angrily. Mulder, you are not married to that perky little cheerleader. You're not David Duchovny. No matter how much you might look like you, nor am I Gillian Anderson, and that little girl is not my daughter. Mulder, this is really unnatural. The more I enjoy being here, the more I think we need to find a way out before we decide we never want to leave. They sat in a huffy silence for several minutes, their backs to one another. Mulder thought about how odd it was to see his partner so jealous of a woman who didn't even exist. Meanwhile, Scully ruminated about how odd it was that Mulder was so taken with this woman who didn't really exist. Finally, Mulder decided to break the uncomfortable silence. Did you reach Gillian's husband? She sighed. No, poor Piper. I think I'm divorced. Well, to get our minds off things, my dear little wife brought me this tape of an X-Files episode. I think she called it Bad Blood or something. Actually, that sounds like it'd be a blast. Think of it, Mulder. A TV show about our lives? I can't wait. Wait a minute, Scully said, stopping short. Bad Blood? You don't suppose this could be about our little, experience in Cheney, Texas, now could it? His eyes widened. Maybe. You think this episode will help us clear a few things up? She looked thoughtful. This will be very interesting. Pop the tape in, Mulder. Let's see how good Gillian and David really are at playing our parts. The tape went in, and Scully pressed play. Scully popped the tape out of the machine, her mouth open in shock. Mulder gaped at the now blank television screen. That is the biggest single-handed piece of crap I have ever seen, Scully. We don't act like that, and we certainly don't talk like that. I mean, that dialogue was so inane. Since when do we talk to Skinner like we did at the end? We'd get our asses kicked out the door. And besides, it was so cliched. Except for the buck teeth. Give me a break. I know. Secretly, Scully thought to herself that they'd gotten Mulder down to the letter. From the hilariously bad ties to his eagerness to believe anything he heard to his tendency to dismiss her opinions and gleeful dispatching of Scully to do his bidding. But that screwed her up completely. This Gillian woman had played her like an uptight, stuffy whiner, not to mention the fact that she'd never reacted that way towards the sheriff, although he had been kind of cute. Meanwhile, Mulder was thinking that Gillian's portrayal of Scully was dead on, although he'd never admit that to her. He'd nearly laughed out loud when Gillian's Scully got hungry from finding pizza in the stomach of an autopsy victim, but stopped himself when he turned to Scully and saw that her lips were pressed thinly together, just daring him to laugh. And then when Mulder's version of Scully made moon eyes at the buck-toothed sheriff, he'd burst into laughter. He just couldn't help himself. But he'd scowl darkly when he saw that the way Duchovny had played Mulder. He'd seemed like an outright geek. Mulder never went around acting like that. Did he? And I've never seen Shaft, Mulder muttered. Excuse me, Scully said. She was deep in her thoughts. I said that I've never seen the movie Shaft, let alone know the song well enough to sing it all the way through. Scully decided not to tell him that scene with Mulder singing "Who's the Black Private Dick? Who's the sex machine with all the chicks? Shaft, can you dig it?" in a drunk stupor was just as she remembered it. She smirked, hiding her mouth behind her hand. Then she frowned as she remembered something that had annoyed her about the beginning of the episode. Mulder, why do you suppose your name came first on the credits? Because you're the star? Because you're the big macho man? I'm the one with the advanced degree, she muttered petulantly. Mulder sighed, knowing when to ignore his partner's testy rantings. Scully, can I ask you a question? Sure, Mulder. Do you really feel that way about me? She looked at her partner, her expression softening as she understood what he meant. Mulder, when two people know each other as well as we do, certain personality traits become magnified in intensity 100 times over, simply through repetition. What I mean is, no, but certainly, but certain things you do get on my nerves occasionally. Don't you ever get annoyed with the things that I do? He thought, okay, sometimes, but I don't think that you're a whiny shrew, just in case you were wondering. Scully gave him an odd look. Actually, I wasn't. Oh well, never mind then. Mulder thought for a moment, then came to a conclusion. You know what, Scully? We're taking this too seriously. This is just a TV show. I'll bet the rest of the people who watch this don't take the show even half as seriously as we're taking it right now. Of course not. No, because they're not the ones whose lives have been turned into a packaged, processed, pasteurized mass cultural commodity before their very eyes. She put her hand on his arm. Come on, Mulder. Let's surf the net. Maybe we'll find a clue that will help us figure a way out of this world. They turned the computers on. Okay, Scully, Mulder said, his jaw said determinedly. How about you look for information about the show while I look for information on the backgrounds of our alter egos? I doubt we'll find much, but maybe we'll get lucky. I don't know, Mulder. She typed the X Files into the blank on the search engine page and pressed enter. I don't think there'll be much about. Her voice trailed off. The page that the browser had returned said that there were 28,229,920 pages that matched her search query. Stunned, she waved him over. Mulder, look at this. He looked at the page and his eyes widened. This has to be a mistake. How could there be that much to say about a television show? About us? Mulder was incredulous, to say the least. He went back to his own computer and typed in David Duchovny. The page he got back was rather disappointing. It only had a few hundred pages on it. That was depressing. Scully suddenly came up behind him, looking over his shoulder. Mulder, she sighed. It's Duchovny with an H. The H is silent. Oh, sure, Mulder said hastily. I was, just seeing if you'd notice. Scully smiled and went back to her computer. He retyped the name and pressed enter. His eyes bugged out when the page came back with the number 3,452,243 pages matching his query. I can't believe this, Scully. This guy Duchovny is everywhere on the net. He clicked on the one at the top and a new page loaded in his browser. The graphic at the top said DDEB. Mulder furrowed his brow, wondering what that meant. He looked closer and groaned. It stood for David Duchovny Estrogen Brigade. Jesus Christ. The next page he clicked was on the Duchovnyacs. He simply couldn't believe the amount of stuff dedicated to his actor. He couldn't understand the appeal. Finally, he found what seemed to be an abbreviated biography of the man. Hey, Scully, listen to this. He cleared his throat, just as I am right now. I thought I was fairly well educated, but this Duchovny's got me beat. Get this. He went to Princeton undergrad and wrote his thesis on Samuel Beckett, and then he got his master's at Yale and came this close to getting a doctorate in English literature. This page says that the topic was magic and technology in contemporary American fiction and poetry. What a nerd. He's got me beat by a mile. Just why an actor would need that much of an education is beyond me, though. Don't you think? Scully? He heard the gentle sound of snoring. Mulder got up and came up behind her. He tickled her, startling her awake. Huh? What? Scully lifted her head groggily. Oh, sorry, Mulder. I'll stay awake. It's late. If you want to go to sleep, be my guest. I could never sleep anyway, especially in a place like this. Too damn comfortable. Mulder looked around, confused expression on his face. No, that's okay, Mulder. We need to figure this thing out. No, that's okay, Mulder. We need to figure this thing out. So, what were you saying to me? I was saying that David Duchovny is a scholar, which blows my mind completely. The actor who plays me is better educated than I am, and apparently the guy got his start in a beer ad. His next big role was as a cross-dresser, Scully. Maybe David and I should get to know one another, Mulder cracked. Find anything about me? I mean, Gillian, Scully corrected herself. Well, I just found a page that describes how Gillian Anderson came to play the enigmatic Dr. Scully on the X-Files. How? Anderson moved Anderson moved around a lot from London to Michigan. She once got busted in high school for screwing with the locks on some doors. After deciding not to become a marine biologist, she graduated with an MFA from DePaul University Theater School. Then she won some regional award for starring in an off-Broadway play, but her only TV role before X-Files was apparently some short-lived Fox series called Class of '96. So basically, Duchovny's the scholar, while you, dear Gillian, are the master thespian, Mulder lisped, imitating a British effete. What an interesting pair we are. Next, you'll be telling me that David's a sex addict and Gillian's a park rocker. Gillian, what an interesting pair we are. Next, you'll be telling me that David's a sex addict and Gillian was a punk rocker in her early days, Scully said, shaking her head in disbelief. Nah, Mulder thought. I won't tell her. So, Scully, what are you finding? Scully shook her head. I can hardly believe what I'm reading. People seem to be obsessed with us, Mulder. And I do mean us. There are pages and pages of fan fiction written about Mulder and Scully. She smirked. You'd love some of it. It's X-rated. Ooh, tell me more, Mulder grinned. She scanned the page. Listen to this. Mulder and Scully enjoy a night of passion when Skinner gives them an assignment to investigate a murder in a nudist colony. Sounds pretty good. Want to read it to me? You wish. Can't blame the guy for trying. Okay, what else? There are image archives and episode review pages, but I haven't looked at those yet. I'd love to read those episode reviews. It'll be like reading a biography of ourselves, don't you think, Scully? Oh, sorry, Mulder, I'm just, looking at something. She moved to change the page, but Mulder was too quick for her. He came up behind her and looked over her shoulder to see what she was looking at. He grinned when he saw. Scully was embarrassed by a page she'd found that was filled with daringly sexy pictures of a nearly naked Gillian Anderson. I can't believe she dresses like this, Scully muttered, her cheeks bright with color. Look at this one. It's from the Golden Globes. There you are in a sedate tux while what I'm wearing would put Madonna to shame. She glanced at Mulder and was disturbed to find him with his mouth hanging open and his eyes bugging out. What the hell are you gaping at, Mulder? She growled. Nothing. It's just that I was thinking you should raid her closet once in a while. Don't tell me you just said that, Mulder, Scully warned. I'm a better shot than you are. Said what? Mulder said innocently, and tried to forget how gorgeous Scully, oh right, Anderson had looked in that cleavage-bearing champagne-colored gown. Then again, if Scully dressed like that on a daily basis, he'd never be able to concentrate on his job. Not that a little distraction ever hurt anyone. Scully clicked on another link and came to a page with jaw-droppingly gorgeous picture of David. He looked like a GQ model, and despite herself, Scully found herself drooling. She glanced at Mulder, who was engaged in surfing at his own computer, and licked her lips. Scully had never seen Mulder like this, and she couldn't believe what it was doing to her. She found herself right-clicking and downloading the photos before she realized consciously that she had done it. She scrolled down and saw a photo that featured a mostly naked David Duchovny, legs long and tanned, and a cocky grin lighting up his face, with only a teacup over his nether regions. Scully gasped, choked, and started coughing, her face turning bright red. Mulder came over to pat her on the back, but his hand froze in midair when he saw the picture. He stared at the photo for a long time. Well, Mulder said, finally. At least it's a big teacup. He went back to his chair, leaving a very flustered Scully to fantasize in peace. Suddenly Mulder burst out laughing and tears came into his eyes. Startled, Scully dashed over to him to see what was so funny. She wanted to fade into the wallpaper from embarrassment when she saw that The title of the page was. Scully apparently had a page dedicated to her by OBSSE, Order of the Blessed Saint Scully the Enigmatic. I'm not a saint, she asserted defiantly, spots of color appearing on her cheeks. Oh, really, Scully? Name one unsaintly activity you engaged in the past years. You make Mother Teresa look like Evil Knievel. To her immense consternation, Scully couldn't think of a thing. Okay, maybe so. But what makes me so damn enigmatic? He looked at her, holding his sides, tears streaming down his cheeks. Her attempts to deny it were only making him laugh harder. Look at it this way, Scully. It's a compliment. Oh, yeah? Some lady on a review page mentioned your ill fated hairstyle from last year. She called the style hair wings. How's that for a compliment? She didn't mention that the same lady had attributed Scully's lapse in fashion sense and bad hair of 3 or 4 years ago to Gillian Anderson's pregnancy. Wild dogs couldn't drag that out of her. Mulder snorted. You can do anything worse than that? Come on, Scully, I dare you. I found a webpage called Mulder Torture Anonymous. Is that a compliment too? Mulder stopped laughing. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Scully sighed. It's a fan fiction page that features stories torturing you either physically or mentally. Apparently, your fans enjoy it. Well, that's flattering. Anything else you want to use to deflate my ego? Mulder, you're forgetting something. These people aren't naming websites after you and me. We're FBI agents who live in and around Washington, D.C. area. The people they know are just two-dimensional characters on some TV show, for lack of a better word. They're not us. So you shouldn't take it so personally. The point of this is to figure out what's going on so we can send ourselves back to where we belong. You're right. I'm sorry. I think having all this money and success so close at hand is screwing with my mind. I know what you mean, Mulder. I find myself really enjoying myself today. That life seems so easy, so careless. In comparison to ours, I mean. Yes, Scully, but David and Gillian don't have each other. We do. I wouldn't give you up for this life, not for a million years. Scully's eyes became bright with tears. Right back at you, she smiled and gave him a hug. Scully pulled away from him. Mulder, I've been thinking. I don't think that I should automatically discount your idea about skipping dimensions. He stared at her. Really? Really? I've seen enough to convince me that this isn't just a frightening... Really, I've seen enough to convince me that this isn't just a frightening... Oh God, I can't pronounce this word, guys. Really, I've seen enough to convince me that this isn't just a thorough practical joke. And it's even possible scientifically. We didn't go anywhere, Mulder. It's reality that changed around us. I think that the solution to this puzzle is right in front of us. We just haven't seen it yet. Mulder shook his head in wonder. I can't believe it. They're right. They're actually right. We are MFEO. She looked confused. We're what? Made for each other, Scully. It's internet slang. I went to this X-Files news group I found and they said all sorts of fascinating things about our relationship. I wasn't sure if I should share it with you, but what the hell? Here it is. They mostly see me as tortured, guilt-ridden, obsessive loser with an amusing oral fixation and a predilection for porn. And they see you as a strong, brilliant scientist who will do anything to come and save me from whatever situation I've got myself into. They also seem to enjoy rating your taste in pantsuits and complaining that our lack of personal life apart from one another is unrealistic, whatever that means. Scully's eyebrows were sky high. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. And now for the romance angle. There are two parties out there, mostly, Mulder continued, encouraged by his captive silent audience. One camp believes that we should just get it over with and have a relationship, a non-platonic one, I mean. Those people are called shippers, which is short for relationshippers. The other camp thinks that a romantic relationship would ruin the show. They're called no-romos, as in no romance. But many people think that the show would end if Mulder and Scully got together. This seems to be the popular consensus. Scully was shocked. These fans of this television show said those things about us? That they did. It's amazing. Somehow, I think they know us better than we know themselves. Than we know themselves? She stared at him. A shiver went down her spine. Mulder, did you just hear yourself? No, what do you mean? You said know themselves. Don't you mean ourselves? Mulder yawned. Jillian, I'm too tired to do this with you right now. What on what on God, oh God, now I'm getting tired. What on God's green earth are you talking about? Scully gaped at him in horror. Do you see what's happening? We're becoming these actors. We're no longer our own persons. We can't distinguish ourselves from the television, Mulder and Scully. Do you see? We'll cease to exist as unique individuals if we allow this to continue. Playing the part so well is changing who we are. We will actually become David and Jillian. The idea chilled her to the core. Mulder nodded, suddenly realizing that something strange was starting to happen. I know exactly what you mean. I don't feel comfortable sharing myself with anyone out there. And yet I'm reading about myself as if he's not me. He was becoming confused. Scully began to sense her identity blurring inside of her head. She blinked in confusion. Mulder rubbed his hands over his eyes. Jillian, what's happening to us? She looked frightened. Dave, Mulder, I'm Scully, remember? Remember, you're Scully, and I'm David. No, damn it! He could feel his entire personality slipping away. I'm going to bed, Jillian. Take Piper home. Now, go to bed. Her expression was stricken. No, Mulder. No, you're Mulder. Fox Mulder. He shook his head and for a moment came back to himself. Scully, you've got to get us out of here. I can't do it alone. I'm not strong enough. He could feel his whole self fading away. Suddenly, suddenly something Scully heard earlier that evening that had stayed with her all night came back to the forefront of her memory. It clarified her muddled mind, and she clung to it. She didn't know how, but she knew it was their way out of this anonymity that threatened to swallow them whole. Mulder, kiss me. What? Kiss me. Scully, are you making a pass at me? No. I know how to get us out of here. I know what will give us back our identities. We've got to kiss. Do you remember? The gas station attendant said it, and what you said reminded me. The fans say that the show will end if Mulder and Scully ever got together. The show will end. This, Scully waved her hand around, will all end. We'll become ourselves again. Things will get back to the way they were. It's the only way, Mulder. She didn't have to tell him twice. They both rose and walked towards the door. The air began to hum, and it seemed to crackle with electricity. Okay, Scully breathed. Ready? As I'll ever be. Okay, Mulder cut her off, his mouth over hers. They kissed each other, each savoring the newness of the delicious sensation. Suddenly, the door flew open and Taya stormed in. Mulder and Scully turned their faces to her, but their lips were still locked. They were afraid to break the safety of the contact. You bastard! I knew it, Taya cried. The Enquirer was right, wasn't it, jerk? The room was fading around them. Mulder whispered Scully's name. Scully. They were both deposited down on a hard, dark wooden floor. Dazed, they both looked up. The ceiling was different. A dozen or so people looked down at them, staring at them as if they were lab specimen. Mulder stood up shakily. What the hell is going on here? Scully rose, grabbing Mulder's arm for support. One of the men, a grizzled old man in a lab coat, smiled at them. You passed our test with flying colors. You made it back. You tested our inventions for us, agents. Our thanks. You mean your machine did all of that? Scully breathed. Precisely. We weren't expecting your partner to turn the switch when he did, but that just made the test all the more credible. You mean you disappeared just so you could rope people into testing your machine? Mulder's voice was heavy with resentment for how they'd been taken advantage of. He didn't like it one bit. No, we disappeared to get you and Dr. Scully to come to investigate and take our test. We knew you'd come. How? The X Files branch of the FBI is well known in the scientific community because of all the strange discoveries you two have made. So, we've been following your work and, by extension, your partnership. But why us? Scully wondered out loud. The man smiled mysteriously. We know you better than you know yourselves. With that, the man turned the knob again, and the men all disappeared, leaving Mulder and Scully alone once again in the big, dark Tudor mansion. FBI headquarters, Washington, D.C., Assistant Director Skinner's office, 9:42 a.m. the next day. So that's it. They simply disappeared without a trace. Skinner said, a strange expression on his face. Mulder nodded. And that's the way it happened from start to finish? They exchanged glances and Scully nodded hesitantly. Yes, sir. Agents Mulder and I are convinced, she glanced at Mulder, who refused to meet her gaze, that the scientist's invention was some form of virtual reality machine that literally put us into a role-playing game. It was so real that both of us believed it was really happening. She took a breath. Skinner eyed them both. Skinner eyed both of them in turn. And this is what you feel happened to Agent Mulder? Well, I can neither confirm nor deny Agent Scully's version of events, since they occurred solely inside her head. And I can neither confirm nor deny Agent Mulder's version of events. That is essentially exactly the way it happened. Essentially. Mulder looked at Scully. Except for the part about Scully's acting. She rolled her eyes. The end. Well, this is it. Live reading of an X-Files fanfiction to celebrate the 1 year anniversary of our podcast, and also a recording of the episode, a live recording. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next month. But before I go, a few announcements. Number one, we have a Discord now. I wanted to create a smaller fan community, smaller fan group where, we could get to know each other better, sort of, as opposed to what's happening on social media. Not that social media is entirely bad, but I just wanted something where I would know people's names. And so it's called Phantom X Discord, and it doesn't mean that you have to listen to this podcast to be on Discord, although if you are listening to this podcast, never mind. Anyway, I will post the link to the Discord in the description also, so you can join. We have a lot of fun there. We just talk about the show and catch up, and we do watch parties and share fan fiction and fan art, and having a jolly good time. Second announcement, well, you already heard that one. We're on YouTube, so listen to us on YouTube with closed captions. Subscribe and like and share and all that fun stuff. And yeah, I guess this is it. It's been a year. Seriously. I don't know. Like, this podcast has been the most reliable and constant thing in my life. Like, one of the most. Jobs come and go. Grad school is a whole nother can of worms. I don't want to get into it now. But through it all, I just kept doing this podcast month after month. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for being with me on this journey. And I'll see you next month. Bye.